The Canada Institute here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. It's my pleasure to welcome you. You may ask, why is the Canada Institute working with China Environment Forum? Well,
they both start with a C.
They both start with C, and they both end with A. And we thought that was a really good reason. No, actually, we've worked together the past couple of years on looking at what Canada and the United States have done with China, and we've had grants to do that, and it's we've enjoyed working with Jennifer and her crew, and they've enjoyed working with us, and we thought, why not continue it? Very briefly, the Canada Institute looks at Canada-U.S. relations, and we have a very narrow focus of what we do: energy and environment, which this falls under, trade, and border security. We occasionally look at other things, but it's really trying to get the American policy-making community to understand about Canada, which is very often forgotten here.
Even though it's close.
Even though it's really close. It's like, oh, those Canadians. So we have actually a guest from Canada today, and a real Canadian, but we also do
we had artificial Canadians previously.
Yes. We have a series of publications called One Issue, Two Voices, and there's several of them out there, but one I thought you might be interested in, since this is more an environmental crowd. We looked at the myth of water abundance in the United States and Canada. If you look at a map, you think, oh, there's lots of water there. Well, there's not really a lot of usable water. And Canadians think Americans are going to come get their water, and Americans have their own water issues, so we thought it was time to do a piece on that. So with that, I'm happy to be here today. Really looking forward to the discussion, and I will turn this over to Jennifer.
Hi there. I'm the goofy one of the China-Canada partnership, obviously. Jennifer Turner. I know since there's the few of the Canada folks here don't maybe know the China Environment Forum. We've been here at the Wilson Center for 12 years. I've directed it for, people in the audience know, we'll say 10 years. She's been here 10 years. I've been here 10 years. And China Environment Forum, I mean, we're a little different in terms of most projects here are either, you know, a country or a region broadly doing issues. But we focus on China energy and environmental issues writ large, and have been, you know, bringing together NGOs, government, business, and researchers from around the world to come together to talk about and, you know, practical examples on what they're doing in China. Because I'm real you know, we're both real practical people, and we picked today, as you know, the theme, because you know you're here, so we assume you do know the title is greening business in southern China. We chose that theme because, as all of you know, China is the world's factory, right? If we took everything out of the room in here that was made in China, we would be in trouble. And very immodest. And but a lot of this growth, though, in China has been built on a foundation of environmental degradation. And for the China Environment Forum for 10 years has been putting on meetings about looking at, you know, we've had, you know, the World Bank, NGOs, government agencies coming in talking about what they're doing. But what's one of the core problems, though, in China is that businesses are owned by local governments. And trying to give them incentives to be greener has been very difficult. But I think really starting, and I think that Jay will probably talk more about this, but the international business community, which is big investors in China, have been doing work on greening their supply chains, not just because of China, but kind of globally. It's kind of a new trend. And it's very exciting because now there are NGOs such as BSR, Business for Social Responsibility, and others working to help Chinese businesses green themselves. And we're hoping the China Environment Forum that we'll be doing some more meetings throughout the year, bringing in other international businesses and NGOs that are doing this kind of work, because I think it's a trend that those of you in the room that work on China need to be aware of. And, you know, it gives us kind of that feeling of optimism, right? We need that. So today, you do have the bios in front of you, so I'm going to be extremely brief. We're going to start off with Wei Dong Zhou, who's smack dab in the middle there. He's the Director of Consulting Services for BSR in China. And he provides counsel to BSR member companies and their supply chain partners, and also runs BSR's China Training Institute, which trains factory managers on CSR. And he's like rampant anecdotalism today, because I asked him to. He's going to tell you lots of stories, so you'll learn about BSR and some of the things that they do. And then second, we're going to have You-Zhi Tang, who is currently the president of Air and Waste Management Association Ontario section, and he's also the director of Canada-China Environmental Cooperation and Cooperation Council. And he has other businesses, too. His resume is quite long. But he's going to be talking about some of his experiences working with various companies that have been, you know, kind of the political environments, et cetera, that have enabled him to be working to green businesses. And last but never least is Dietrich. He's a senior technical staff member on the Corporate Environmental Affairs staff with global responsibilities for climate stewardship and energy management for IBM. Okay, I'm stopping because I want to make sure. These guys have like they've got these big PowerPoints, and we're trying to squeeze them all into 20 minutes apiece. And your job, ladies and gentlemen, is to quietly munch your food and listen attentively. Thank you. You have Mike.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much for Wilson Center and to invite us come here, to share some latest trend and green business in China, what's going on. And it's a little bit funny. So when Jennifer and we met 5 years ago in Guangdong, that time she's leading a delegation with her legislator and senators in Guangzhou. That time I talk about migrant workers, labor rights in the supply chain issue before I joined the BSR. So today coming for to share some the trends about what's going on in China. Doesn't mean I'm the expert on climate or I'm an expert on energy, but I would just want to bring some learnings, some projects we are doing with my team in China to you and see what is the next step between China, U.S. and Canada. We can collaborate. So I would like starting with this question. I mean, let's just think about there is lots of discussion between globally and also between country. So can red China becoming green? This is I just thinking with my colleague Paving here yesterday. Say what we can start, where we start. So I just found the map from the world last night. Luckily I found the red color China. This it's a big chicken, but in red. So can the red China become green? This is my topic today. So you probably hear lots of stories and read articles. Many in the Western newspaper media is about problems, about issues, criticism. So lots of I think than me, which I might not know or I might not see in China, in mainland. So about water pollutions, air pollutions, is lots of this kind of story. I don't want to mention that. You can easily find many report, many research done by many environment organizations. So the big question put on the table today, I say, is this green could be possible in the near future. Before I move to my key points or some stories, I just give you a little bit about what BSR we does, who we are, what we're doing. So BSR is a nonprofit organization, which is a membership association, which we have 250 plus members around the world, but 80% in the North America. So, for example, IBM, HP, Microsoft. This we divide our members by industry. So we have the office in the 6 location, headquarters in San Francisco, New York office, Paris in Europe, and we have in Asia we have Beijing, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong 3 offices. So our staff is very diverse, diversity. They come from very different countries with the languages about 20. The members our members in about 10 industries. I mentioned the consumer products like you familiar in this country, Walmart, Target, Sears, Nike, that type of consumer, P&G, Unilever. We also have the technology, information, ICT sector, IBM example, Microsoft, HP type. We also have lots of energy and mining company, pharmaceutical company, transportation, agriculture, food, Starbucks, McDonald's. So that types easily you can see. And how we run this organization. So because we are membership association, so their key is we call it a member, create a platform for member network. So our research development, actually we have our R&I, Research Innovation Director, Ferris, there. Probably you can dig out more what his team is doing is a leading, we call it forward-thinking research on issues like human rights, like issues like migrant workers, issues like economic rights, like climate change. Today we'll talk about energy, lots of very emerging issues, we are facing. And we also do lots of advisory to our members, companies, consulting work. For example, in China, we're doing CSR reporting, CSR strategy, and sustainable strategy for Chinese companies. Cross-sector collaboration is one of BSR's unique advantages, because we have members in about 10 industries. Now we not only work the members in the particular industry, but we also doing cross-sector. Give you a sample, one sample work we are doing for many years, over 7 years, called a Clean Cargo Working Group. This is a kind of environment-focused working group which cover the people from consumer products like Walmart, IKEA. Though they use goods from China, but the majority, the initiate this working group is a shipper, transportation company. So we include, people from supply chain, the producer, and in the end retailer, and the transportation. The people come together to discuss how we can minimize their impact on the environment through this whole supply chain. The last part give you some what BS are doing. We are organizing the largest CSR conference every year in America. So we do East Coast, West Coast every year related. So this year we'll be in San Francisco. We called Reset Economy, Reset the World. So this is a very challenging period. So people can come together to talk about, the CSR and the sustainability during the economy downturn. So if you want more details, you can go to the website. We are doing, during the 4 days, we do lots of trainings, very practical trainings. We also have at least 6 keynote plenary speakers, from CEOs from those leading companies. In the past, we have a CEO from GE last year, CEO from IKEA, CEO from SK Telecom, South Korean. So, this is the events to bring the really latest leading perspective. How BS are we working? So I already mentioned one also called collaborations and emerging issues, standard involvement, and the member-supported research. So I won't go details. Just go our website. You can find more. So now I want to go back. Their topic. Green business in the South China. The reason we are putting in the South China, I think that so far for this topic, nationwide is starting. But what happening in the South, there has been lots of things done in the past 3 years. I think that today the speaker include Dr. Tang, Mr. J from IBM. We will, to share some, I think, the most with a project in the South China. So I will start with CCCTI, a China Climate Change Training Initiative, as a first example. This is a project at BSR we are launching last year with a seed funding from British government called Sustainable Program Fund. These funds is the aim to supporting Chinese business and the Chinese government and non-government sector to have the awareness, particularly on the climate change. What BSR we has done last year. So we are trying to train and equip those Chinese business leaders, particular executives level, and their middle management level, in the company, in the factory. They can evaluate themselves, measure the data, and report, about carbon or, energy consumption as a first start. So the project actually very small. We started very practical as how to evaluate, how to measure, how to set up, many companies, they don't have this measurement. They don't have metrics, don't have data. If you're asking, they only know how much money I spent. They don't have the proper analysis. Why this month my expenses on energy, higher than others. So that is the start where we did. So for the participating companies, which include industry from apparel, is because we got lots of apparel industry members: Levi's, Gap, Burberry, Coats, Li & Fung, Dickers. And we got footwear like Nike, Adidas, Payless, Timberland, electronics, Jabil, Philips, Dell. So and just like list this, you can see that like food, automotive, consumer products, Starbucks, Cadbury, P&G. So those companies, they send in their regional officers plus their key suppliers to attending this training. The case studies during the project, we have a complete to follow up with 10 pilot factories case study. Then they can get what they have learned during the year before the training and after training. They do the case studies. 95% respondent have very actively give to show their data, what they have measured, and it's about a company has successfully implemented energy efficiency programs, had reduced energy and usage and by at least 20%. So because this is not, I say this company is about 25. In the end, we did a report summary is about 25 company, not a large number of company. This is also, if you want more, you can go to the BSR channel website. So for this is we call it CCCT, a particular training. And then after this project, we are actually successfully got this experience learned during the year. We packed this project as we call it 2009 Energy Efficiency Training Series, now to openly to all of the suppliers or Chinese factory in South China through BSR China Training Institute, this platform. So I won't go to the 4-day training, what they cover. They cover the low-cost solutions, how to financing the opportunities, problem solving, energy-saving technologies, those type of 4 topics. We are invited the very practical, trainers which has industry experience, worked in the factory, more than 10 years on these energy-saving issues. The next case I would show you. The recently we are involved Walmart. Probably if you work in the environment sector, you probably heard the Walmart story. So Walmart CEO Lee Scott, yes. He actually last year they are launching their global supplier summit in Beijing to public, their 3 big goals, which is very challenging. All the people say how they can get there. But this project we starting their China operation. They're headquartered in Shenzhen. BSR, we were because they are a member of us. We were asked to create a small team to helping them to back up them to do the program designing, particular focus on the supply chain, how they can motivate and start from their suppliers in China. And we also helping them to designing data measure to measure the suppliers' energy consumption, including electricity, water, boiler, and air conditioner, those type. And also we're helping them doing the events supply forum management. So we're just helping them to organize 1 day 400 people suppliers conference in Shenzhen, which they're formally ruling out this program. So there's give us a sample, the Walmart Leadership Award. So what is it doing in China? We mean their incentives to encourage company, particularly Chinese factories, from a small to the big one. they do two things. One is called an environment award for factories and suppliers. The second is called energy efficiency award for factory and supplier. We are involved helping them set up called, this broad category. What is the indicator we can evaluate to do this ranking or award internally. So energy management system on track to achieve their Walmart objective. Walmart objective for China suppliers there how to be average 70% reduction by 2011, 20%. The goals. It's very challenging. And also they have working with their, their local partners. We call it ESCO. I can mention a little bit. ESCO, energy saving companies. How they can work them closely to helping them give the solution, particularly on the technical issue. Okay, so that's about Walmart. The second case is about CTI energy efficiency training. I just mentioned a little bit. This has been, launching formally last month. We got several brands like IKEA, Adidas. So this they actually call their key suppliers to do this first series. It's a 4-day package of training. Covers the issue like how to understand the energy audit report, understanding the cost savings through the energy efficiency, also choosing energy service provider, how to back up them, doing the ROI, return of investment analysis. So this is a training. What's the training for? So the case 3, I would introduce actually the recent, actually just last week before I come, we are launching another program. It's actually an extension of British government SPF fund, Sustainable Program funds. We are working with a local Guangdong Energy Conservation Center. We work with them as a partner, sponsored by the British SPF funds. We will do 2 years project, target 100 top energy consumption company in Guangdong. The goals is by 2 years, cut 20% of their energy consumption. So also challenge. But we will do the first round, 25 company as a start. Through trainings, capacity building, system setup, energy audit, 2 case metrics, and also do case studies. So in the end, we will try to do a report together, bring back to the local government, even the NDRC in the central government, see how this can be done in the more largely scope in other provinces. So this is just give you some business case. How this is about with the government side. I am recently 2 weeks ago, I was in Tianjin. There is a global green business summit, the first one in China, which organized by Business Week and with the Tianjin city government and the CEC, China Enterprises Confederation. So they bring about 500 people from government, universities, but 70% is from business, from companies. Together, doing 2 days discussion, different session topic discussion on what is the greening economy in China, what is the future. So during this, there are 10 companies I want to share you is about they doing the first award for top 10 greener business in China. 5 domestic company, 5 international company. So that's the name called, maybe you heard, maybe you not. So I would, with this company you are very familiar with, I think they have done excellent job, no surprise. But this is a focus on the China operation, how their real products or the operation, the data can show they are really, green. But this file, I would keep your eyes open. Broad Air is a very brand new Chinese company, but it has been set up for 20 years in China on their building conditioning, cooling system. So another called BYD, particular, you heard the story, Buffett, Buffett, right?
Yeah.
He invests his company 10%. This is a it's kind of car, how to say, electronic car company. Will be interesting for you to look at. And higher is a I think probably everybody knows this name, and he means solo is a solo 太阳能 we call it a company. Suntech is also the largest solo what is called 太阳能板 how to say that solar panel producer. Yeah, so this is some company you need to pay attention. So here's my comments, how the successful business, how successful company will be, what is the characteristics they should have on the green. So this is because I was also sitting the panel, a judge panel for this whole process. So this is the five top I would share with you as a company if you want to take the lead on greening business. Firstly, you need to have the leadership thinking, particular forward thinking. Many companies are thinking the green, they need lots of investment, there's this considering the ROI, return for investment, but you have to have the leaders, forward thinking leadership. The second called economic visibility. This is particularly important in the developing country. You have to be, visible about what can be retained. The third, this is the same everywhere, innovation. Innovation means not only the products, not only their, their design, technology, also your mindset. Particularly for China, the traditional management style, mindset innovation, organization structure innovation, a system innovation. That's the third one. The fourth, we call it execution. This is about how you can implement. You need a team. You need a very strong, both top to down, execution, strongly execution team. Also, you need a bottom up, from workers. The worker side, supervisors, they also can get the sense, can do that. The fifth, I think, is very important. I find these 5 companies. I'm very surprised. I visited 3, so I'm very surprised of them. The corporate culture, the culture involves the workers, grassroots, first line people. The culture in the company, they're energy saving, environment conscious, the environment oriented. So this is, I think, is a new trend in China too. So I won't want to go too detailed because of timing, but we are very lucky this year, BSR conference, we just confirmed early this week, the CEO of Broad Air, Mr. Zhang Yue, he will, attend our San Francisco conference, give a speech. You need to open your eyes. This guy is very, very interesting. He has a very different view about business. He even, very politely say, I cannot come to the conference because my view is very firm what the business people doing now. He's actually the teacher before. He's a teacher of arts in the middle school. But he set up this company in 1988, and after 20 years, actually, you may not hear there's a #1 market share in United States for the building cooling system. Sorry, I said wrong. For the non-electronic air conditioning, they are the #1 market share. So the last part I want to share with you the emerging trend of green business in China. This is mostly, what is the next trend for greening business in China. So 5 points I want just very quick to summarize. So government policy will be more strict than before. They're under NDRC, they already set up the Energy Bureau and also the Ministry of Environment Protection. They all now starting about the climate change, standards, regulations. All of those is under discussion. So they will coming more and more strict than before. The second is about human resources, labor force, particularly we call the green job. In the next, 3-5 years, this is the economy, this is a new green business coming, booming up. Talent, people is a key, make your success. The third is a top-to-down approach. In China, most thing you know, they can make things happen overnight, which some country maybe need a few years. That is a different approach. China, we call it the one-party dominated, but they can do big things very quick. So this is another change. China, the business needs the user SOEs as a leader. The SASAC, the State Asset, SASAC, how to say that? 国资委 State Asset Administration Supervision Commission, which is in charge of largest 150 biggest Chinese company. So they are also starting this. They have the meeting, they have the conference to asking the company, doing really, target work, 20% or 10%. This is another trend. The fourth, incentives. How to incentive and initiative. There's a green loan, green insurance, green securities, all under discussion by Shenzhen Stock Exchange, Shanghai Stock Exchange. One example BSR we are doing now is actually funded by the Canada government. Canada government through IFC. We are doing a project called Sustainable Investment in China. Will be this Friday. Next Friday in Beijing, we will have a roundtable to review our draft. This project has been 3 months. This public report will be, I think, available in September. Okay, the fourth is a provincial level initiative. Also, is very important for people here. But in China, there's huge. There have many provinces. So provinces also take their own initiative because this leadership, they are changing the model. They're using, normally before it's called depending on GDP, on your performance. Now they call it green GDP. But even there's lots of different voice criticized on the green GDP. Is that work or not? But local government, they really, I think Dr. Tang will share some Guangdong experience later. How the local government, the city government doing. So in the end, I go back again today. Let's in the end with rethinking Red China can be green. From my own perspective, view, I'm very optimistic. I think that's, coming very soon. So that's my part. Thank you, Amy, for you listening.
And I think that during the Q&A, we may actually ask you, because see, he had a much longer PowerPoint, but we might ask you to tell some stories about like the organic tea place would be really great to hear about. But yeah, we'll switch to You-Zhi Tang.
Okay.
And You-Zhi, and if you use the hand mic, You-Zhi Tang, Dr. Tang, make sure you keep it close to your mouth like Wei Dong did. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure here, and thank you for the organizer to invite me here. Well, obviously, you see the two flags. Canada is red too, so I cannot turn Canada green. So that's not my mandate, trying to turn Canada green. So anyway, for most of you guys probably don't know me in Canada. I don't need to do that, particularly in the Canada-China environmental cooperation field. But for you folks, I have to briefly tell you some of my background so that you know where I'm coming from. I'm currently a partner, board member, or advisor of more than a dozen cleantech companies. When I say cleantech, it's my short form of cleantech is environmental protection, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. So there are two companies, VC, venture capital, and private equity funds, and I am a partner or advisor. And the other companies are basically technology providers. So we're trying to provide the financial and technology solutions to China. That's the focus of today. Probably I sent Jennifer my old CV, so she said I'm the current chair for AWMA, but in fact I already retired last year from AWMA. AWMA, it's originated from the state. It's headquartered in Pittsburgh, where one of the largest environmental organizations in the world. I was the first Chinese Canadian to take the chairship in Canada, and I'm the founding chair of Canada-China Environmental Corporation. But anyway, you can see some pictures from the mayor of Toronto, Middle, the premier of Ontario. We went to China together, I as the advisor to him, last November to China for a mission. And then Mr. Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, down there, although for helping Canada-China cooperation, he's, I will give him a fair mark, but I still have to shake his hand, unfortunately. Here, well, we are going to focus on southern China and particularly Guangdong. So why am I related to Guangdong? Born in Guangzhou, capital city of Guangdong. I worked there as a farmer, and I don't know if you heard about the Cultural Revolution in China. I just catch the end of that and was sent to countryside as a farmer for 2 years. And luckily, I was among the 10,000 lucky youngsters get admitted to university after the Cultural Revolution. The 10,000 among 1 million in Guangdong. That's in 1977. And then I'm currently a adjunct professor of 2 Guangdong universities. And there are some other affiliation with Guangdong. And this year, in February, I was one of the 20 invited by the Guangdong government abroad, one of the 20 from overseas to attend the so-called People's Political Consultative Conference, which in fact is one of the important political organization in China. Just, you know, China, they have the Communist Party, the People's Government, and then you have the People's Congress, and then there are other mechanism. It's called the People's Political Consultative Conference. So I do have a lot of connection with Guangdong, so I'm going to share some experience with you. By the way, that's the picture talk there, and that's President Hu Jintao. When he visited Canada in 2005, I was one of the few got invited to meet with him and had a picture with Hu Jintao. Anyway, we talk about opportunities, greening business. So since I'm also a VC guy, I just want to show you a little bit the trend, a global clean tech VC investment trend. You can see a steady increase globally from 2002 to 2008. And no surprise, this year we'll expect a decrease there. That's no question. In fact, the last quarter of last year, the investment, VC investment in global green tech is also decreasing. But here I want to give you what's happening in China, also a dramatic increase. The reason I'm showing you this picture is just want to say my personal opinion. In the next 5 to 10 years, China will be the largest market in terms of clean tech. So talking about services, technologies, products, that's for sure 5 to 10 years, the largest in the world. But anyway, this is a quick global trend and what's happening in China in the area. We got to talk about some specifics. So now I'm a Canadian. I'm trying to promote the Canada-China Environmental Cooperation in China. No, not only in China, actually, I would say cooperations are always two-way street, and I will show you examples later. Here, I'm just trying to share some challenges, difficulties we are facing. Some are Canadian-specific, and some we may share for the North America or other Western countries. First of all, Canadian companies are relatively small in size, so projects in China are normally very big. that's a huge challenge to Canadian companies to participate in China. And also the technology commercialization process is pretty lengthy in Canada. You're talking about 5 to 10 years for some research result, new development innovation to become productivity. But in China, people don't have the patience. And as I always advise our Canadian politicians or our Canadian colleagues, it's we can wait, but China won't. So that's the issue. We need to keep up pace with what's happening in China. And, well, you know, always under the big shadow of the big brother due south, Canada, you know, have a relatively low or no profile in China in comparison, particularly in the recent year. U.S., European country, Japan, or even Australia, in my opinion, are doing much better in China than Canada, which is really a pity. And of course, the geographic distance, poor understanding, language, culture, political issue. Technology factors, there are always some misunderstanding from the Chinese part when they come to Canada and they see the green air, the nice water, clean water. They will say, oh, you guys must have a very good technology to preserve the environment. I said, not necessary, you know. I use the analogy. I say, hey, you know, in Canada, we don't have many of the problems the Chinese are facing. So if we don't have the problems, we don't need to develop the solution. So it's like there's no cancer, there will be no oncologist. And of course, there's ways of doing things very different. In China, people, bang, 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 they always talk about opportunity, opportunity, and opportunity. But when Canadians are presented with these opportunities, their mindset is, what's the risk, right? So very, very different, and Wei Dong already mentioned, mindset. But of course, the mindset also comes with the reality, so we have to deal with that. Being said so, we still have quite a lot of Canadian success stories. There's a company called Thermal Energy International, which I will talk a little bit more later because there's some typical examples. All these companies are involved one way or other, and they're doing a variety of things. For example, Canada Energy Corporation, they started in China 4 years ago. Now they're doing about 50 million U.S. business per year in China doing geothermal projects. Fourth generation is a small Canadian company located in Beijing, and they are mainly focused on carbon trading, CDM, that's type project, and they have successfully concluded one project for Guangdong Dian, which is the Guangdong Electric Corporation. Dow Power, now I spend quite a lot of time helping Dow Power because we are going to list it publicly, put it on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Why I mark it red? It's because that's what I mean. The technology we are going to deploy in North America and in the Caribbean region, it's from China. It's one of the A63 project of the Chinese Science and Technology Ministry, and they commercialize that in China. We are taking the technology to North America, and by the way, we get a lot of interest in that particular technology from U.S. And of course, we have a 9 megawatt small wind farm in Ontario, and the wind turbine is from Goldwind of China, which is now the third largest wind turbine producer in China. With respect to changing business and public behavior, we have a small Canadian consulting company, Summerhill, doing very similar thing as Wei Dong's group. And interestingly, they are working with Home Depot in China. And Home Depot is an American company, but their president, China, happened to be a Canadian. She's also in charge of Home Depot Canada. So they have launched more than 5,000 eco products in China, which helped China a lot to green their home. So, well, since Canadian companies are relatively small in size, so we really have to work with or work through governments in both Canada and China. It's a fact for many Canadian companies. They would say in Canada, they say, hey, you know, I'm doing business. What do I have to do with the government? That's very typical Canadian culture or thinking. But like it or not, that's the way of life in China if you want to do projects. So we work through the government, or we work with the government. Down there, that picture is just last month I was there with the mayor of, of Lanchong, and also the Canadian Council in Chongqing. So we have the Canadian company, the president from Thermal Energy signing a contract with the general manager of Yanjing Beer in Sichuan. Yanjing, I think now is probably one of the top 3 or top 2 beer companies in China. So now let's get a little bit specific. Let's say thermal energy story. I want to tell you the thermal energy story. Thermal energy went to China by the end of 2006. Actually, they went to China because they received an invitation from that time the largest, the richest Chinese woman, Zhang Ying, working for owns 9 dragons. By that time, 2006, she was ranked #1 richest person, and of course, woman in China. And we got an invitation letter from her husband to go there, and then we went there. And then, since we were in China, we visited quite a few countries. First, we went to see a textile plant, which is a state-owned enterprise. And they're talking about energy saving. So, thermal energy is specialized in heat energy recovery and utilization. When we walk into the plant, we can see very obviously a lot of things we can do to help them to improve the energy efficiency. For example, they have a dryer. They have an enclosure for the dryer. But the workers, for their convenience, they just left the enclosure open. So you can see all the steam, all the heat coming out from there. By just simply close that, you can save at least 30% of the energy consumption of the entire plant. But we were told by the manager of the plant, she said, well, you can recommend any measures, but the first priority is don't bug the workers.
Don't bug them.
Well, that's what you said, the corporate culture, right? Because there's a state-owned enterprise. They cannot fire the workers, right? And the manager, she would say, well, 2 years later, I probably get promoted, or I get transferred to other plant. I don't care. So that's some of the difficulty or mentality we have to deal with. And that's something beyond technology can resolve. Then we work with 2 paper plants. One is the Night Dragon. Eventually, Night Dragon didn't take our technology, although they are the one invited us there. Why? Because our technology, North American technology, we always try to achieve the best. We provide them a technology which can recover over 90% of the waste heat from their exhaust. But of course, that comes with a certain cost, a price, right? You have a better technology, more reliable, then you charge them more. But they will say, well, you know, I can settle with 70% recovery, so I don't want your technology. I want cheaper technology. Fine. Then we move on, deal with rather pulp and paper plant. We got a lucky entry there because the plant manager, who is the son of a Hong Kong tycoon and a graduate of a Canadian university, so he said, okay, I know what the way Canadian works. So he said, we'll buy from you. So thermal energy get their first contract in China. Everyone was happy because that's the first time They were in China. I told them it probably take you 5 visits to get your first contract, and they got their first contract the first visit, so happy. But nevertheless, some of my experience there, besides we talk about social responsibility, help our environment, there are some other drivers. Right now in China, that's the big push for energy saving, energy conservation and emission reduction. It's a government program, very strict. In Guangdong, they have a blacklist for the top 1,000 energy consumption facility. All those facilities I mentioned are among that top blacklist. But of course, when we're talking about energy saving, we can always show them the return on investment, and we can say, you know, you will have a payback. So while you can save energy, help the environment, you can save money, and you can reduce your operational cost. That should be a no-brainer. Most of the time, they buy the theory. So we show them green and clean can be also profitable. That's what we do there. So while some of the secret of success, we have to find local partners. We work with multinational enterprises. Thermal Energy is also partner with Johnson Control and Honeywell. But of course, you know, Tim, he's the Ontario beer drinking champion, so he's not afraid to drink and get drunk in China, right? So which is part of the business culture in northern China. In Guangdong is fine. So after Tim get a few executives drunk, he got his contract. But of course, you see that picture here. Actually, that's an American company. American company, they set up facility in China, and then they're using our technology. So we work with these companies in order to overcome the size difficulty of Canadian companies. The last point, I said, well, you know, there's also a secret of success. Well, you know what? Because all these companies, they have success in China. They all share something in common because they have me on their team. But anyway, let's talk a little bit, focus a little bit more on Guangdong. I hope I'm doing okay. Cleaner productions in Guangdong. We say timing is everything. 10 years ago, when I was an adjunct professor in China, I went to China, I talked about cleaner production. Or in North America, we normally call it pollution prevention. People say, oh, nice idea. You know, nothing happened because that's 10 years ago. Guangdong actually started really pushing cleaner production in 2004. Not pushing, started to have this concept in 2004. And I think now they have the Guangdong Environmental Industrial Association, which is a pseudo-government organization, and the Guangdong Cleaner Production Center, which is under the Guangdong Government Economic and Trade Commission, mainly in charge of the cleaner production. One thing is the Hong Kong government now, they have a very close working relationship with Guangdong, so they will have provide certain funding for Hong Kong invested companies or facilities in Guangdong to go through the cleaner, so-called cleaner production process. But in reality, the whole process is not so smooth. Why? Because again, they don't really understand the whole balance of the game. They too much focused on pollution prevention. They cannot sell the idea of improving the facility efficiency, productivity, and in turn, the profitability. They cannot convince people, or they don't have the expertise, don't have the tool, and don't have the good convincing examples to show people well, as a matter of fact, if you think about that, a chemical plant, your raw material, your products, when they go into the environment, they are pollutants, you get fined, but you're also losing very important materials, because that's your raw material, your products, and those are money. If you can keep those inside your process, you're not only improving the environment, you're also improving your bottom line. But they cannot do a complete example or good case in China, in Guangdong, in order to convince the facility to do it. So now I try to focus a little bit more on a city or municipality I am currently helping with. It's called Jiangmen. I just show you here. That's the Pearl River Delta. That's the Pearl River. That's Hong Kong here. And they are going to build a bridge, a Y-shaped bridge to connect to Zhuhai. And also that's another arm to connect to Macau. And from here, that's the Jiangmen area. That's the city here. So in China, Jiangmen or in Guangdong is the second-tier cities, not like Guangzhou, Foshan, Shenzhen, and Dongguan. Those are the more industrialized ones. Jiangmen, it's still, you have a lot of natural beauty here, and you have a nice port, fishing port there. But they have some major industrial as listed there. Well, but you can see this is not a great number. They try to implement cleaner production in 14 facilities. So far have 10. They passed their so-called audit and get awarded the title of a cleaner production facility or whatever. But you can see for a city with a million of, not million, and it's tens of thousands of facilities. This is a very small number for what they are trying to accomplish. So what am I doing there? In fact, I get directly invited by the executive deputy mayor to help out Jiangmen to green the city. So we are not talking about one thing. In fact, I'm doing a couple things there. First, it's they want cleaner production. They want my expertise and my team's expertise in terms of providing the solutions. What they find is locally they have organization to provide the consultancy on cleaner production, but they don't come with solutions or how you change the process in order to achieve the result. And they're hoping I can help them to solve everything. And I told them I'm not a god, so I cannot solve everything. So I will start with paper making and paper products, food, pharmaceutical, electroplating. And I told them I'm going to start with low-hanging fruits. And that means I can help them to improve their energy efficiency to start with, which I can see a lot of low-hanging fruits. But of course, I'm not an energy guy. In fact, I'm more an environmental guy. As I said, I used to be the vice president in Canada for CX2M Hill. CX2M Hill. CX2M Hill is one of the largest U.S. engineering company and helped China for their green plan for the Olympics. So I'm helping them wastewater, air, and I don't do that by myself. I do have a multidisciplinary team. And of course, in fact, and they drag me into real estate development, and they want me to help them to build eco-community. And this is an actual drawing of what we are developing there. And everything there, we have a title, we have wind, we have solar, we have a geothermal for that small community, that triangle part. And we have a clean technology demonstration center there. So that's the type of things I'm doing there. So if you guys get confused, don't feel bad, because indeed I'm getting involved into solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, EV, that's an electric vehicle. I don't get involved with hydrogen or fuel cell. I'm working on heat energy recovery and lighting saving, that type of things. And in terms of direction of cooperation. I'm taking Canadian technology or North American technology to China. I'm also taking Chinese technology to North America. And my background is the technology guy. I am getting into the capital market, including the VC and private equity fund in investment, and also listing Chinese companies in North America. So what are the big questions? Well, that's Jennifer asked me. Is Guangdong leading its way in greening business? I would say it's not as good as what I expected. Guangdong is definitely China's economic engine, the biggest one until now, but Guangdong is not particularly leading the way in terms of greening business. We have a lot to do. And what and how we can help? Well, we have some free Q&A time, and we probably discuss that during that period. And but that's my job. I keep shaking hands, and that's the governor.
And getting drunk.
Yeah, right. And that's the governor of Guangdong, Mr. Huang Huahua. Hopefully, he will stay in power for another few years. You never know. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We'll switch over slides, but you can stand up too? Okay. Make sure you hold the mic close, so I don't have to sit there the whole time going. The reason we webcast this, so that way people in Cyberland can hear you.
Ready? Okay, so I'll keep the mic up.
Thank you.
So I work with IBM. My background, just in general, is that I worked in plant operations for 23 years. I was environmental manager at one of IBM's semiconductor plants, did a lot of different environmental stuff. So in that role, I chafed under the various helps you get from the corporate organization. So deciding that if you can't fight them, join them, I then moved to the IBM corporate staff and have taken over the responsibility for climate change and energy policy. And what I want to do is build on what Dr. Tang and Wei Dong talked about in terms of the importance of corporate culture and corporate business processes to drive changes and get a focus on energy efficiency and environmental issues in parts of the organization or in areas that are developing and growing very quickly. So what I want to walk through is go from really a corporate hierarchy of, at a corporate level, the management system that's in place, and then how that translates all the way down to a plant level operation in China or India or in the United States. And the really interesting thing about this is just a quick analogy is that when you deal with plant sites and organizations, it's like dealing with teenage children. All right, so I have 2 teenage sons, and they have a variety of tactics to avoid doing what you want them to do. One is if I ignore it long enough, it will go away. That's a favorite. The second is I will always argue the rules to understand precisely what is being asked of me. All right, so that's the second opportunity. The third opportunity is they can tell you to take a hike. Right? And so what you find as you work with plant sites, you get all of those behaviors in various forms. And we'll talk about how those play in as we work through the presentation. So the first thing I want to start with is IBM has a global management system. And that's based off of a corporate environmental policy. It's been in place since 1971. I know you can't read it, but I've highlighted 5 specific items. 3 of them basically say our operations will be environmentally responsible. The bottom 2 say I'm always going to work on improving that, and I'm going to get audited every once in a while and assess myself. And I highlight this one because I can't overemphasize the importance of auditing. Because if somebody thinks they're going to come and look at what you're doing, and there's actually consequences if you're not doing it, it completely changes the behavior of an organization. So the management system then sets up a set of what we've got corporate instructions that deal with different environmental areas, water use, energy management. We'll look at that one more specifically. And it then sets up the requirements for the individual plant locations or the individual countries to have a management system that ties back to the corporate management system. And again, it's important in that it creates a set of baseline expectations that each location, each country has to meet, and then it builds out on the registration audits to actually go look and see, have you done what you said you're doing? And then we derive off of that as well a corporate environmental report where we talk about what accomplishments have been done in the organization. Off of the management plan, then you set up a group of objectives and targets. And so these, for example, in a manufacturing facility, we have product stewardship requirements, percentages of recycled material used, energy efficiency criteria for specific products. Again, a set of things in the product area. Similarly, in conservation, pollution prevention, climate protection. So again, there's a set of targets, things you have to meet, and you get measured to them. And again, we'll dig down into that in the climate change and energy area. But that's a very important thing. And Dr. Tang mentioned the plant manager who said, hey, I don't worry about energy efficiency because it's not part of my metrics. In IBM, that plant manager has a metric. They have to hit 3.5% of they have to conserve or avoid the use of 3.5% of their total energy use for the year through the implementation of conservation projects. And again, we'll drill into that. But there's a metric that gets measured. It's in their performance plan. It's in their performance bonus sometimes. And so it starts, these objectives and targets will drive behaviors into the organization. But again, only if you're doing some auditing and assessment behind it. So again, it's like your children, right? If you tell them there's a set of rules, but you don't follow up on those rules, they quickly figure out how that game works. And so the final piece then is this business controls and ISO auditing. And I obviously kind of cut and paste and steal pitches, but I've never understood why whoever originally put this chart together shows this very collegial, loving picture with an audit and assessments graph, because this is not how things work. They really need to have a kind of a rumpus room with a bunch of kids beating up on each other. But because, and it doesn't have to be that way, but in the first set, as you get into the ISO audits, and IBM runs a corporate audit on environmental activities, which is, it was one of the worst experiences of my life. So I had to do 4 of them at a semiconductor plant. They'd send 6 auditors for 4 weeks to look at your processes and say, are you doing what you said you do? One audit, I lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks. And it was all due to the exercises we got put through. But the point again is this is a really critical component of any successful transition of an organization to pay attention to environmental matters to energy matters. There's got to be some follow-up and consequences if it's not being done. So we'll look then at the corporate instructions. For energy, it's a relatively simple document. It's 4 pages. And it lays out the criteria. What's the goal and objective? What are the basic things you have to have in a program? You need to have an energy manager at the site. You need to have a program that assesses your site periodically, typically once a year for energy efficiency opportunities. And you have to have an energy conservation plan for that facility. Right? And then there's some base requirements that also get pulled in there. So from an IBM perspective, with energy and climate change, the highest priority, and really the only priority, is conservation. So our belief is, from an IBM perspective, and we try to drive this not only into our locations, but we're doing work with EICC, the Electronics Industry Citizenship Coalition, which Wei Dong's organization works on as well, is to get firms to recognize that the best investment is an investment in changes to your facility that reduce your energy use and reduce your emissions profile. And that, in IBM last year, well, we had a banner year, but we had projects that reduced or avoided our energy use, about 6.1% of it, which has a net dollar value of $32.3 million to the business. So it's a significant piece of cash. It's a significant impact to our operational expenses. And then we're also slowly starting to work on understanding different credits that you can get. Chicago Climate Exchange, we're a member and register our North American emissions, so we're developing an understanding of cap and trade systems as an example, and then another credits becoming more significant as utilities and governments begin looking at how do we get energy efficiency, drive energy efficiency incented is these energy efficiency credits where you can document a project, verify the savings in energy demand, and then receive credit for that from the utility. So we've got then, you see our corporate energy conservation project, objective 3.5% across the company, 4% for the top 100 sites. The real estate and site operations organization that runs all our facilities has a 7% annual energy consumption target, which drives the local staff's nuts because you can't do it for the most part. And then we also have a CO2 emissions reduction goal of 12% against a 2005 baseline and getting those reductions by 2012. And so again, we're focused here really on doing this with energy efficiency and some renewable energy. All right, so we've looked at now, so this lays out really the corporate process. This is the structure that I run. You know, it's the old deal. I have no responsibilities, and I'm from corporate, and I'm here to help. And so then you move into how does the organization itself execute on these requirements. So IBM has a global energy management group with a single manager that's responsible for the overall program. And then we've got a whole collection of energy engineers that work at the different sites. And the main thing, great, I just want to point out, so this is the U.S. structure, the North American structure, but then we've also got a detailed structure in the overseas group. So we've got a European representative with then supporting staff underneath him. The same thing in Asia Pacific, and you can see we've got 15 regional reps in the Asia Pacific. And again, so the point here is that in order to get these savings, to get the returns that Dr. Tang mentioned, you've got to have staff to do it. And that oftentimes is a real problem. So who's responsible for energy? Who's responsible for chasing down energy efficiency? We even have that problem sometimes in IBM, in that you pull back $50,000 on support staff, and you lose the opportunity to capture $200,000 in energy efficiency work because you don't have somebody looking at it. And so that's something that this organization has really tried to change. The other thing that they do is they look very closely at where do we use our energy. And they do that at a group level, and they force it down to each location. And so you see here the major pieces of equipment, the air conditioning equipment, data centers, so the listings there. And then we look at, all right, what's the percentage of energy use in each of our building types? So we've got a rough idea of what that looks like, and then we've got teams assigned that look at what are the energy efficiency opportunities that we want to pursue in each of these areas. And that then takes us to the process. Oh, God. Sorry. I didn't think that would happen. So we talked about the standards. From the standards and these building teams come a set of checklists. So we've created a global set of energy efficiency activities and projects that we expect all our locations globally to review and implement where it makes sense. Sorry. So we do the checklist, and then there's site reviews. So there's that audit component. Some of it's done on-site by the energy management team. Some of it's done over the phone. But there's a significant, it's a review that says, all right, you've gone through the checklists. Here's the 5 things you said you're going to do. That's good. But here's 3 things you said you're not going to do. Why aren't you doing them? They're obvious. You should be adjusting your lighting schedules, let's say. So you're not turning your lights off from 8 p.m. at night to 4 a.m. in the morning. Why not? And what we found is by doing these site reviews, you uncover additional projects that can be done within the system. And then we go through and we'll look at, you end up doing some measurements. So we've got global metrics that are publicized through to the management team. So this is, I just put this up there. This is an online checklist. This is one page of about 25 that's on the enterprise network. all of the sites, all of the major locations, the top 130 have to complete this. They have to go through it. They have to identify what's working, what are they doing, what are they not doing, and then based on that, what's their plan over the next 2 years to begin to close the gaps of what they're not doing. And then that gets that review by the staff to make sure that they're not doing, you know, what my teenage son does, which is if I ignore this long enough, it goes away. And in fact, that is the strategy in a lot of cases. The other favorite strategy is we don't have money. And that's a different discussion, but properly done, you can get that worked out as well. That then, so that's the checklist. Then against those objectives I talked about, the 3.5% energy conservation objective, we've got reports that are up again on our global system, on the enterprise level IT system. They're password controlled, but any exec can get a look at these. The sites hate this. They absolutely hate it. And you can see they're red and they're green, so you get immediately assessed. Are you there or are you not? But again, this gets people's attention. The management team's looking at it. I'm getting publicly appraised by the management team and my peers, and I'm being assessed against how I'm doing against these requirements. And again, there's nothing to motivate people like measurements and review. So now let's take that down to the next step. So these requirements then are assigned to our China locations as well as Asia Pacific. And I put this chart up just to make a point. Through until 2 years ago, you'd have a lot of energy efficiency in the United States, and we had a lot of trouble in Asia Pacific and Europe. The percentages were typically around 1.2%, because the focus wasn't there. We've added this system in the last 2 years and started generating these kinds of metrics and charts. And so we went from 600 energy conservation projects in 2007 to 1,500 in 2008. And I just wanted to point out, in Asia Pacific, they came in with 293 projects. So in the past, their conservation percentage against the goal was 1.5%. Last year, they were at 4.1%. And the China locations that are covered by this, I think, had about 40 of those 293 projects. So again, the point is, it's a measurements and metrics, and as you globalize it and set a set of expectations across the organization, then you're going to get these kinds of results. So again, what we've got in our China locations are an assigned energy coordinator. That individual, I think, covers the country, and he spoke or was part of, I think, the BSR meeting. But he's responsible. He owns getting the locations to work towards the goal and get things done. And in turn, those operations have to meet the requirements we've talked about, and then we do the assessment. So they get an ISO audit, for example. And about usually a week or two before the ISO audit, I always get a note. What are they going to do to me? You know, what's the criteria? Can I get the list? And so we send off the list of questions they're going to be asked. And amazingly, we've never had anybody fail an ISO energy audit. So again, if you know somebody's looking at you, you're going to make sure you're meeting the criteria. So then, over the last 2 years, the China team has really put a lot of effort into getting the program started. So until about 2 years ago, they were managing the program sort of like I talked about my son, right? If I wait long enough, it goes away. There's really no consequences for not doing it, so I'm just going to kind of keep doing a little bit, and nobody's going to bother me. So last year, somebody bothered them, and they were able to hit 3.1% conservation overall, and the Shenzhen manufacturing facility was able to do 4.7% reduction. And it was primarily focused on what I would term the low-hanging fruit that Dr. Tang was talking about in terms of kind of the office light manufacturing use. Getting the lighting right, delamping the fixtures, putting in more efficient lighting systems, turning the lights off when nobody's there. You know, and turning off the air conditioning when nobody's there, and making it a little bit warmer. The plant site I'm at, they've been slowly ratcheting up the office temperatures, and the way they work it is they keep raising it 0.5 degree every 3 weeks, and they watch how many people complain. And you can pick the line, but they picked up, I think, 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit in building temperature, just walking it up that way. And then when they hit, I can't remember what, say 73 degrees, it went nuts, right? Everybody's calling, they're complaining I'm hot. But you found out where the spot was, and you picked up 2.5 degrees in probably about 5 or 10% reduction in energy use for those systems. The manufacturing area, they started to get into a few more sophisticated activities. They looked at optimizing some of their assembly floors, getting them into one area so that you only had energy use in that one area, and you delamped or pulled out, shut down the other area. Managing PC and monitor power, which is something we've been working on. And again, so on about 65,000 megawatt hours of power in China in total, they were able to conserve about 1,600 megawatt hours. So the next steps really for our China team is looking now at some of the more sophisticated energy efficiency opportunities, things like more innovative power systems, chiller systems, those kinds of activities, typically which tend to be investment-based, so we're going to have to get money for it. And then we're also beginning to look at renewable energy options as a way to work on our CO2 reduction goal. So in conclusion, so the main points here, one is that an energy conservation program is most successful if you've got an organizational structure that drives it. There's got to be metrics, there's got to be management. If you don't do that, you get teenage behaviors, and things don't get done. Working at a global process, and we're seeing this working in the EICC group, and we did some carbon disclosure project work. The companies that have these kinds of systems in place are the ones that can deliver results, can explain what they're doing, and have objectives and targets that are driving down their CO2 emissions. The companies that don't are the ones that aren't reporting or are not making significant reductions right now. So it's an important piece of getting your organization focused on it. And finally, as Dr. Tang and Wei Dong said, there's tons of opportunities out there. It's incredible, particularly if you haven't started looking at it, what you can do if you pay attention to it. And that's one of the things that IBM is doing in working through EICC, is trying to get the supply chain to look at these kinds of things, get a structured approach to it, and drive the results.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So kind of covered a broad area, 3 very different kind of angles, but I think there were some cross sections here. Why don't we open up for questions, and please say your name and affiliation so they know where you're coming from, and raise your hand if you have questions. They're stunned. Actually, I'm going to kick off. Oh no, there's one. We got one right there. And you need to grab the mic. Alan, could you, the gentleman right here in the right, raise your hand so we can see you, sir. Sorry. It's at the very bottom, the on switch.
I'm Ken Kaufman. I work for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And my question is, can you give some examples of China going green in terms of the environment being beneficial for American businesses or companies or specific firms for that matter?
I almost think that's a Wei Dong question.
Say again the question?
Is China going green being beneficial for international corporations or specific American businesses or corporations?
Actually, I just mentioned the Global Greening Conference in Tianjin. For American business in China, because of the BSR, we have lots, members. They operate in China. IBM is one of example. For others, they operate in China in, like the sample 3M. There's the top 5 I just listed in my presentation. They all have done extremely, program on ground. Either their policies, global policies implemented in China, also to modify, compliance with Chinese environmental standard and the policies. So GE has done tremendous work in China. HP. So I think there are many, for the multinational companies, particularly U.S. corporations, they have the higher awareness. They have a higher standard than Chinese so far. That's I think. But there is some operations, some companies, they're also facing the challenging in terms of the environment. You know, you probably heard many from NGO sector, from NGO angle, they see the business like Greenpeace angle, they target some company like water and electronic waste. You know, HP has also facing those challenges on their electronic waste. Coca-Cola has water challenges. It doesn't mean these companies, they haven't started, look at the issue, but this is the issue as a business in every country they are facing. China is not different, so just.
Can I add to that? Though I'm a Canadian, but what I mean is, your specific question is what's the benefit to U.S. companies, right? If you're talking about U.S. companies in the North American continental, I would say don't talk about the political and the environmental things. From an economic point of view, it places the Chinese company in the same playground, leveled playground with North American company. Otherwise, because North American or Western companies, if they have a higher environmental standards, they may have a competitive disadvantage against the Chinese companies which don't have the same bar. By raising that bar to the international standard, you play everybody at the same playground.
Some other questions? Okay, right over there.
I'm Christine Quinio from Georgetown. Mr. Dietrich, I saw that you had ISO 14000 as part of your presentation, and that's a voluntary code. Do you see a lot of other companies that are actually also participating in that standard? And I guess my broader question is, in terms of the regulatory frameworks, or a global regulatory framework, there's obviously still a lot of debate. How are you preparing, or how are you involved in sort of the dialogue in terms of the standard setting across companies for all of you?
Well, so ISO 14000 is a fairly well adopted standard now. So you see actually a lot of companies in their purchase agreements require companies selling to them to have ISO 14000 registration. Or they want to understand when you plan on doing it. So from a standpoint of a regulatory environment, we operate within that at a couple levels. So we've got a global staff that keeps track of regulatory developments around the globe, and we determine where are those important to our operations or to our products, and then engage either directly through staff members or through groups like EICC, where it's an industry issue, the Electronics Industries Citizenship Coalition, or other organizations that do that kind of work. But internally, we do a lot of work to try to set those internal standards I talked about at a level that are anticipating where things are going. So, for example, right now, a lot of focus on energy efficiency in different products and in operations. Europe's got the 20-20-20 requirements or goals that are going to turn into requirements eventually. So how do we position ourselves to deal with that, but recognizing that those kinds of initiatives are going to then extend out globally from wherever they get started, and different things are getting started in different geographies. But what you I think see occurring much more rapidly today is homogeneity, a standardization of the standards over time, because business is pushing for that. If you've got 50 standards in 100 different countries, it becomes extremely difficult to manage to it. And we see that particularly in the materials business, where just small differentials can really stress your supply chain trying to keep track of stuff.
I want to follow up, Jay. You mentioned something about, the Shenzhen plant, which, since our theme is southern China. Can you tell us anything more about this? What does this plant produce? You said it made big strides on energy efficiency. Why were they so successful? Do you know? I mean,
the success came. Well, let me start first. So they assemble this servers, System X and System P IBM servers, and the reason they made great strides is because they started paying attention to it. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, in the past, it was like what I talked about. There wasn't a lot of focus on that particular metric particularly in our Asia Pacific group and also in our European group. So this isn't a growth market, mature market kind of discussion. It's a management discussion. And bringing online these checklists, forcing each location to do that work, introduces the next set of discipline that drove action, because now I recognize I'm being measured, Dad's paying attention, and so they started driving results.
But you did something that struck me, so when you talked about how like you lost 10 pounds when you had the audit, and I've heard when we actually went to the China Environment Forum, we did a not this kind of field, but looked at food safety issues and talked to a lot of food manufacturers, and a lot of them were saying like, oh, the audit fatigue, because it's not just IBM auditing, but then you've got sometimes the Chinese government is auditing, and maybe all of you could comment on this, because I think it's really important, and I mean maybe it's a different, they listen to you because you're dad, to continue the metaphor. But I wonder if you have anything to say about that, because that's an important tool to create that culture a bit, but can it be too much? Or no? Is Dad speaking?
Yes. Well, as a former son, it was really painful. It requires a balance. Those kind of assessments and audits need to be recognized as an opportunity for continuous improvement. And so the one I've pointed, the corporate audit, was done as a business controls audit, which is not considered a collegial event. It's a contact sport. The better audits are the ones where you're working together to work through the process, and ISO audit's kind of like this. And if you're not doing what you said you're doing, why aren't you? So either adjust your process or your process documentation, or adjust your process. But that kind of assessment drives change. It makes people say, okay, yeah, we're not doing that, so we need to do it, or we're not doing that because it's stupid, so we need to rewrite our documentation.
Okay, some other questions out there. Mats.
It works. Some of you mentioned the concept of green GDP, which doesn't seem to really have taken hold in China. Have you seen any new initiatives with the Chinese government of revitalizing that concept as incentives for the local government officials?
So I just mentioned a sample for green GDP has been by the central government for its kind of evaluate the performance for the local government. After the fast growing for more than 15 years, the government also realized about this economy sustaining, their sustainable model. So the green GDP, they're talk about for 2-3 years ago, some initiative actually, one of we involved, BSR involved as a consultant, work with the China Academy Science, 中国科学院, China Academy Science, CAS. We are creating kind of called indicator index for second tier city, how to gather those category by the detailed indicator for the local government to measure, to measure those data. So this is one example we directly involve. For others, initiative done by 中国社会科学院, China Social Science Academy,
Chinese Academy
of Social Science. Sorry, yeah, this is too similar. But they also have done recently indicator. World Bank, IFC also promoting this type, but hasn't been kind of nationally recognized one standards yet. Also different ministry, they promoting different initiative like housing, 建设部 construction ministry, and like environment EP, MEP, they both have a different focus from their work.
Well, I'm not talking about the figures, but in the political arena, there are a number of rumors, particularly like Li Yuanchao, now the one of the senior Chinese official. The rumor was he was supposed to be promoted to the deputy premier rank, but because when he was the #1 guy in Jiangsu, Jiangsu was pretty poor in terms of the Tai Lake pollution, and that's one of the state on his record, and that's why he didn't get promoted to the deputy premier rank. But of course, those are rumors. Right? Also, this time I mentioned to you, I'm helping Jiangmen city, and actually I was called upon directly by the executive deputy mayor of Jiangmen, and he's in charge of environmental protection. And this guy, he's very aggressive in terms of the so-called low carbon and green economy, low carbon and green economy. So obviously he was not promoted from local. He was sent by the provincial government to this city, and obviously he carries a certain intention of the Guangdong provincial government in terms of trying to upgrade the entire industrial structure, because Guangdong was heavily on manufacturing. And now they try to upgrade their industrial structure and work much towards the so-called green economy or low carbon economy.
Just want to add into this question, there are initiatives, you can look at the very, the Tianjin Binhai New District. That's the one, I think, the central government big pilot for the next 10 years. They are trying to create their new developing model. They're trying to different from a Shanghai Pudong model. So because they were saying during their last 30 years economy reform, Shenzhen 4 special zone model, right? Then second period in the early 1990s is Shanghai Pudong model. And now is we call the sustainable development model of Tianjin Binhai New District. So this is I think this is a government one trying to set up this model to other provinces. This is very interesting. There's already developed, very small, but the area is small. Inside Tianjin, there's called a Singapore and Sino-Singapore Eco Zone. So this is very interesting. They already developed what green GDP means, green indicators by, I think it's 5 categories. Mm-hmm. You can look at the website, they already posted. So this is another, I think, should be worth to watch closely, see how they can be spread out.
Hi, I'm Stephen Dahl, recently back from Oxford. I was in, this is a question for You-Zhi Tang. I was in China recently and had a chance to visit a lithium factory and doing a walkthrough energy audit. The thing they were most interested in were process and quality improvements. And yet, if you look at the energy efficiency business, it's historically been organized as a generalist practice, looking at buildings and lighting and some of these things, and only indirectly touching on process. Do you see the industry starting to change in response to these business drivers?
That's what I'm trying to do. But, well, seriously, yeah, you're pretty right. But even building energy efficiency is a big thing, because China, none of the buildings are insulated like North America. So it's a big thing. But when you're talking about industrial process, I don't know the facility you visited, whether it's a state-owned or privately owned, because I didn't really emphasize on my presentation. But indeed, there's a very obvious attitude difference between a state-owned or privately owned enterprises, and it is why when we talk about the the small Canadian companies, we always trying to focus on the private-owned company because they can see the economic benefit in energy saving, in addition to the environmental and social benefit. But for state-owned company, for example, for thermal energy, actually they have a product. It's a 10 years warranty. But when you're trying to sell that to a state-owned enterprises, it's a disadvantage for 10 years warranty because the guy in charge will say 2 years later, I'm not going to in this position. So, but in terms of the technology, that's in Jiangmen City, that's one important thing is a lot of work currently done. They're doing an audit saying you have this problem, you have this problem, but they can do some of the, for example, lighting. But for the process, that's the trouble. Is the people doing energy audit or the people doing the environmental work, they don't have the process background. That's exactly I'm trying to help the people there understand, and that's how I can help with my engineering background because many of those things, basically you talk about a process change to make it more efficient. And at the same time, you save energy, you reduce your material consumption, and you save your money. The key is people, normally, the environmental guy, they're talking about the general environmental thing, but they lack of the specific expertise of a particular process. Because pulp and paper and electroplating, two complete process. You have to understand the process in order to provide the solutions.
Okay.
If I can just add something to that, is the important thing there, because you're absolutely right, is that a general review doesn't get you there. But if one of the things we did at the semiconductor plant was we had pollution prevention teams, and again, it's a management issue to some extent, but you'd get the process team to work with the environmental team. So we'd say, we got this chemical, we really want to use less of it. It's just not good stuff to have around. And you'd start working on getting that out of the process. And what you find is if you can get the process team to do that, as they get into how do I reduce the amount of materials, they unearth within that process quality opportunities, cycle time opportunities, and reduce material opportunities that all of a sudden they will over time become an advocate for doing that kind of work because there's multiple benefits that accrue from looking for how to get a material off the system, for example. And one example we had was they were trying to reduce the titanium layer on in a deposition, and what cascaded out of that was reduced cleaning times, reduced deposition times, and then some reduced times downstream, as well as downstream material uses and improved equipment availability. When they got all done, a project that saved $200,000 in material a year had a net benefit in quality and process time of over $2.5 million. Now that's the exemplary one, and I'll acknowledge that. But underneath that are other projects that did the same kind of delivery. And once you get one or two of those, the process teams start playing ball because it's meeting all their metrics as well as helping you meet yours.
Okay, Wei Dong, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. We are now tackle. It's exactly, people are sometimes the energy saving, energy efficiency is mixed. On the ground, I think there's a challenges we are facing because we are designing the code, package training for the Chinese small medium-sized company, Chinese suppliers. So what we find there, I think there's kind of basic lacking of their basic knowledge. Give you the example. I shared with Jennifer yesterday. I recently visited a tea factory. I think in this room you drink tea every day, the tea bags. But have you realized the tea you drink, how they produce? So one ton of tea, their consumption 110 to 1.2 tons corn. They need a heating process. So the corns burn for heating plus 100 kilogram woods. They're not only there's kind of natural resource waste, but also the air pollution. So what we found during the visit audit is like their basic worker when they burn the corn. Mr. Tang saw the picture. Oh, this is wrong because they maybe can produce a double heat volume, but they don't have the basic knowledge. They don't have proper training. They're just waste those raw materials. So I think there's a liking for the improve energy efficiency. I think that rather than, it's the same important on about saving. It's about knowledge, how to use, how to operate, the process design, like IBM, the system. So I think this part is has to build first in the next few years, and also have to based on what I mentioned in the early called the culture. You have to build the workers' basic, the company's culture about this mindset.
Okay, I think David is going to jump in here.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Tang. The way you presented things, it sounded like Canada could do much better in China, or that the Canadian presence is not as big as it might be or could be, and that you were sort of leading the charge for that. You said Canada's sort of too slow, conservative, risk-averse. The current Canadian federal government has not had great relations with China. And then you mentioned your trip with Premier McGuinty. Can Canada do better, or is it kind of hopeless? Because you also mentioned that Canada is kind of hardly even known in China. Are you leading the charge, or are there other people involved, or
are you the lone wolf?
Yeah, is there a future for this, or?
Well, no, actually, just 10 days ago we have a Canada-China Environment Forum, and I was a speaker there too. So we have about 120 people there, bigger crowd than here. So in fact, it's a very high priority thing within the Canadian society, because in Ontario, 5% of population are Chinese origin. So Premier McKinney said, with China, we are family because we have 5% Chinese. So we are family. It's not only a partnership or friend, we are family. So, but the thing is, with China, they always look things at the highest level. They look at the first, it's where's your premier? I don't see your prime minister in China, and but today is different. You send your minister of finance, and you see minister of foreign trade and Hillary there. So the relationship is pretty hot, and China, you send 10 provincial government to China. It's not equivalent to one prime minister. So that's in the government level. On the practical, down to the cooperation level, yes, Canadian companies, they can do something, but it's they are catching the niche market. It's not like the big corporations like U.S., European, and Japan, and etc. In fact, that's also the Canadian mindset in the past. It's government. Normally, they don't get into business. But Wei Dong mentioned about the new development in Tianjin and in Suzhou, the Singapore government. They use their state government to lead the business delegation and sit there to make a contract sign. Same thing happened for Korean, for Japanese, or even for British company. They have the mayor of London there. They are not only introducing you, they are sitting on there to make sure the deal done. So for Canadian, we have to overcome the fingers phenomenon. That's why I said Canadian companies, they go there individually. We have to become a fist, so have the Team Canada. Otherwise, cannot compete globally. It's a general thing. It's not only for environmental.
Okay, right there with the.
Hi, I'm Wendra Liang with Stanford Law School Energy Society. I was wondering, looking at China's supply chain as a whole, there have been so many high-profile incidents in the past few years. Either there's food safety, there's labor, there's environmental protection also. So given the wrench that the global recession throws into all of this, from your observation, do you think that companies and the government are looking at it as an opportunity to sort of integrate these three priorities and sort of deal with them at once in a structural way, or are labor, safety, and environment competing for resources and being dealt with?
Want me to do? Who do you want to address that? Well, let me say a few words on that. First, I would say in China, probably Wei Dong and Jay will agree with me. It's for the central government of China, they are pretty determined in the whole thing. It's not only the green, it's also the global change issue, because China, as an agriculture country, is most affected by global warming. They take the biggest damage. But the thing is, each level government to the local government, that determination start to reduce. That's first of all. But what I see is things are getting improved. And every time I visit China, I can see the improvement in terms of the people's awareness and government's understanding of the whole issue. But still, again, the bottom line issue is many of the government officials, they still don't understand the triple bottom line, which is economic growth, social development, and environmental protection. They still just say, well, we try to avoid the damage of the environment while we are trying to improve our economy. But my theory is no, improving your environment and go for green economy will help you to improve your bottom line. And they don't get that, but well, how can I complain? You know, a lot of American and Canadian politicians, they don't understand either. So it's just like I was on my bus complaining the big traffic jam in China, and then I was driving from I was taking a taxi from airport into Washington, D.C., and last night I can see the big traffic jam. So what I say is, in North America, allow me to be frank, things are not moving much better. But China have a very low starting point, but things are improving very rapidly, going well. That's my comment.
So I think that your big question is about this several challenging issues like labor, environment, food health. I would say there's strategically, I on the ground still cannot see this has been integrated, by some government agencies together, because it is really challenging issues. Give you an example on water issue. China domestically water issue is the #1 priority. During the last 2 years, you heard a story. We mentioned the Tai Lake, Yunnan Dian Lake, Dietrich. So they're all polluted. But people when the central government is there, they're very clear. They know the problem. This is a conflict between central and the local protection. I mean, the local protection means local interest protection. The local government is a more relaxed control than the central government, central EPA. Actually, central EPA, now they call them MEP, right? They have high awareness, they're very strong voice, but the local local EPA, they're not. They have to listen the local guys, the local government voice. So this is a type of central interest and the local interest. But between the ministry, like still take the water example. Water pollution, the 70% rivers polluted, right? But we in China we have the ministry called the 水利部, water, what's it called?
Ministry of Water Resources.
A water resource ministry, and we have a 自来水公司 in charge of their water supply in city. Then we have the EPA in the local there do monitoring about 排放, exhausting and also how to say discharge. So it's very isolate. They not connect. So this is a problem. They always have a gap. They always have some room for business. Just can get around. So that's I think that's still hard. Under this kind of structure system. Health issue particularly same. You know, their health issue widely, they always have this kind of barrier between.
I want to jump one thing, but interesting to say, since we just to bring it back a little bit to South China, just on your water example, that actually Shenzhen was the first city, and I am curious, and if any of you know how effective it is. They actually, Chinese, bureaucracies don't like being together, but the Shenzhen city forced the environmental and the water, and I think even Ministry of Local Construction Bureau, to be physically in the same office and to work together. And I don't know if they're like dead bodies lying outside, if they actually did. But I mean, it was seen as a model, and some other cities have copied it. And I'm actually going to China tomorrow, and that's one of the, unfortunately not to Shenzhen, but one of my questions I'm going to be trying to chat with some folks is to find out, these have been going on for a few years, but whether or not we are seeing some results, because it's true that, poor regulation by the ministries themselves, the businesses can wiggle in and out, that it's just that it's not always just that the EPBs are weak, but just that there's this, they call it dolong tao, the many-headed dragon controlling water, many dragons or.
But Jennifer, you actually raised a very interesting issue. I want to raise that further. You talk about Shenzhen, they resolved that by putting all the departments together, but that's within Shenzhen. And in fact, when I was in China February, I heard Shenzhen, same time, they will build 10 wastewater treatment facility. But now, there's a bigger issue. It's an inter-regional issue between different municipalities and different provinces. So I told them, I said, hey, probably Canada and U.S. can give you guys some good advice, because seems like Canada and U.S. solved the gray water issue quite well. So.
No, it's different.
Yeah, well, half of China's wastewater they have a lot of wastewater treatment plants, but only half are turned on at any one time.
But the thing is, when a river going through different regions, is it the upstream or the downstream? That's the big argument now, or the dispute in China.
Some other questions. We have time for a few more here. Okay, Cushing, the woman right there.
My name is Christy DeLassio. I'm from the Department of Commerce International Trade Administration, China Desk. I wanted to learn a little bit more about the SOE situation, and based on the successes that you've mentioned in Jiangmen, the ISO 14000, IBM energy audits, do you think that these successes are transferable to SOE energy audits? You mentioned that they don't really happen very often, or people in the SOEs are not very responsive. But of course, in the national policy, energy audit is a very national Chinese policy. Energy audit is a very up and coming topic. So everyone is aware that this is a very useful thing to understate it. So anyway, that's my question. Just how can these successes trickle down to the SOE energy audit practices?
Or up.
Or up.
Since they're so big.
So for this, government there already take the project called Top 1000. I think probably you heard. Top 1000 project. They are listing the top 1000 most energy consumption company in China. Nationwide, to target in the next 2 years. No, there's a kind of 5 years plan. 5 years plan to reduce their energy consumption by 20%. This is so this is the goal is very clear. I think the government realize that, and I think the approach, how they can gather, what is their input they need to bring in. I think that's the question. How really, their kind of international level and domestic level, they can collaborate. As we only doing now in China, the pilot, as I mentioned, was the Guangdong ECC, Environment Conservation Center, where now this year we do 25 company training. So we're trying to bring what IBM, the example, like managed system, data system. So to start, we're trying to develop called a carbon footprint. We try to designing called data collections under energies usage. We're trying to do a kind of we call the energy audit plus action plan by third party on 3 pilots during the year course. See what we can learn. So I think this also where we're very exciting. See in the end if this experience can be summarized, can be shared to the central government.
I heard you mention about ISO 14000, right? ISO 14000 actually in China used to be pretty hot for a certain period. I think it's there are more Chinese companies than in America to have ISO 14000 designation because China, is an exporting country a lot. They're exporting to Europe too, and Europe take this very serious for the ISO 14000 designation. But lately, I didn't hear so often because China, they do things like wave and fashion, right? Now the fashion is energy conservation and emission reduction. So, yeah.
Okay, I think it is. Our time has come to an end. It's gone rather quickly. But these gentlemen will be either within tackleable range, as I always like to say, to ask them a few more questions before they leave. But I want to thank all the speakers for that really good insights today.